the world around you is just a projection in your mind. All of reality, everything that you perceive through any of your senses, and then you process, it all happens inside of you. So if everything that is happening outside is being processed inside, then doesn't it make sense that if we want to meaningfully impact what is happening outside, that we've got to first start inside? I don't necessarily want you to agree with what I'm saying. What I want you to do is really think hard about this question that I asked, because I think and I observe that the source of most problems is a lack of recognition. That ultimately everything that happens and everything we want to do, everything we wish to do, it starts inside of us. And really that is the first thing we have any control over. In fact, that is the only thing that we have any control over. We don't have full control over it, but we have some control over it. So most people never take this first step of understanding this, of playing with this question. Most people want to change what's happening outside without really inspecting what's going on inside. And they do change what's going on outside without inspecting what's going on inside. But then what happens is that it doesn't yield the results they want. It leads to disappointment. It leads to frustration. And our response to that disappointment and frustration is, oh, let me find another something to do outside. Let me find yet another guru. Let me find yet another yoga pose. Let me find yet another tactic. Let me subscribe to yet another newsletter that shows me some fancy chart or 2x2, because that's what I'm missing, and I'm going to be able to affect the world outside better when I subscribe to that next product newsletter. And most people spend their entire careers on this kind of treadmill without ever looking inside. That is the first step. And it turns out that if you honestly start taking that first step, then the rest of the journey you'll figure out on your own. You've really got to look inside and ask yourself and understand yourself. Ask yourself, like, why do certain feelings exist? Why did envy just come up when the CEO mentioned a peer's name at all hands? Why do I feel so good when the CEO mentions my name at all hands? Why do I feel so triggered by this particular person on my team? Why do I tend to look forward to one-on-ones with this person on my team, but tend to dread one-on-ones with this other person on my team? Why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling fear when going into this conversation with this exec? Why do I feel frustration when legal says that they need to meet about this feature I'm just trying to launch? So that is the first step, because this whole idea of managing your psychology is essentially about first understanding yourself. And look, this is not like some step, oh, now I have understood yourself. It is a lifelong journey. But as you start understanding yourself, what ends up happening is now you can start to manage it. You can now start to manipulate it. You can start to go into these one-on-ones with this person that you don't like having one-on-ones with more curiosity, with more openness. And therefore, now you're going to be more effective with that person. This permeates pretty much everything you do. Managing your psychology is about understanding how you are currently processing all of these external inputs and then creating a projection of those inputs as your reality. A big step for me, and again, I can take zero credit for this myself, sometime in my mid-20s was when I asked myself this simple question, which is like, oh, I'm in conflict with this other person at work or somewhere else. And I think that I am the right person, I'm the right party, I'm correct, and they are not correct. And I ask myself this simple question, is that what they are thinking as well? Which is that Shreyas is correct and I am incorrect. I, Bob, am incorrect and Shreyas is correct. And of course, the answer to that is of course not. Of course, Bob isn't thinking that he is incorrect and Shreyas is correct. So then I asked myself, well, what might Bob be thinking? And then the answer was, well, Bob is likely thinking that I, Bob, am correct and Shreyas is incorrect. So then what's the next big question after that? The next big question for me after that was, okay, here you have two seemingly intelligent people, maybe Bob is more intelligent than me, that are processing roughly the same information. Let's assume the state of the world is constant between Shreyas and Bob, and somehow this processing that is happening inside is resulting in a different computed output. And in most cases of conflict, like literally the opposite output. So then I said, that is interesting. Why is that happening? Oh, does it mean that perhaps if I can try to simulate Bob's processing and work backwards from his conclusion that Shreyas is incorrect, that I could replicate Bob's processing. Well, I can't fully replicate it because I'm not Bob, but I can try to simulate some of it. Oh, wait, that means that I can hold in my own mind two different ways of processing roughly similar information. And I can even come up with a rational explanation for why Bob feels that way. Oh, that's interesting. Does it mean that there are only two ways of thinking about this situation, mine and Bob's? No. Oh, that's interesting. I can actually think about all of these inputs and I can process them in a number of different ways. So instead of being this single threaded central processing unit, I can kick off multiple threads with slightly different programming and assumptions, and I can arrive at different computations for similar input. Oh, but wait, I can actually change the inputs. I can choose to see some inputs that I'm not seeing at all, that I'm ignoring because of my cognitive biases. Oh, how wonderful. It's not only that I can change my processing, but I can also change the inputs. And again, this wasn't like some epiphany, like one fine day I woke up. This was a gradual process. Most people don't ever embark on this journey. And most people are again fixated on the hows, which is like, oh, but what's the mental model? Yes, the mental models are useful because if you don't have anything, the mental model is useful. But what that does is it doesn't enable you to think independently. It doesn't enable you to really truly understand yourself. Say you are feeling a little anxious or nervous. Yeah, there are all sorts of techniques, particularly say for anxiety. There are all sorts of breathing techniques and various other techniques and yoga. And this is what people will recommend for people who are going through a period of anxiety, which is like, oh, you should do yoga, you should do running, you should do some cardio, and you should try my breathing technique. It really works well, etc., etc. And it does work in the short term because the thing is you fool your body into thinking you're safe and therefore your mind actually then starts feeling safe. Yes, that does work in the short term. But notice one thing, that if you get stuck with just those tactics, there are people that are facing these types of problems for years and years and years. They use the tactic, they use the breathing and whatever else, and that gives them temporary relief, which is good. I'm not saying it's bad. But if you get stuck with that, then what happens is you're also stuck with the actual feeling. That's why no yoga or anything is ever going to cure your anxiety. Because to cure it, you have to look inside. The hows don't work. These how-tos don't work. I just used anxiety particularly as an example, but this applies to pretty much any problem or any kind of challenging situation we are facing. We have to understand what is going on. We have to truly, truly understand what is going on to be able to effect change out there. So that is what I mean by managing your psychology, which is, yes, managing suggests that you manipulate something, you manage something. But the first step to that is just understanding. And once you understand it, the managing kind of just happens.